Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I did a video last week where I used a lot of the quotes that I usually use from comic prose, and I tried to quote where they were all from, and it really just got in the way of my video itself. But I really like to footnote things because I come from an academic background where you footnote everything, and I moved from that into a legal field where you have to make notes on everything. So I'm really used to making notes and footnoting everything, and I want to do that with my videos, especially with all the quotes that I use a lot. So what I am doing now is on my Twitter, I am actually putting everything up there that I use as quotes all the time. And I'm going to be putting a whole lot up there for all of these quotes that I use over and over again. And my Twitter handle is RJ of the Island, which is in the description of every video if you want to go and check that out. And I'm connecting them all under the hashtag Comics Betrayed. So that's what I'm putting them under. But as I went and looked through all of these quotes, it really brought something to the forefront in my mind anyways, because I have all of these things written down in a PDF. You know, if they're from articles, I just cut and paste them. If they're from podcasts or from panels or anything like that, I actually transcribe the parts which I want to use for my videos because I want to be able to quote them specifically and not to be using paraphrases as best I can. I want to be able to quote them. So I was going through all of these things and I started to see this pattern because I've been collecting these things for well over a year now. And what this pattern is that I see, it is a pattern of loss. It looks like the pattern of what happens at the stages of grief or loss. And I'm going to go over some of these here today because we're not done with these stages, and I think we're in a very dangerous stage right now for comics. So I want to go over some of these quotes and talk about this pattern that I see. And I want to know if the rest of you see it as well. So the thing is that this loss that comics took, I do believe it was in Marvel Comics, when they had to give up on all of their switch-out characters. You know, Jane Foster's Thor and all the rest of them. They had said at one point that these are the new characters and everybody is just going to have to learn to live with it because they're not going to change back. But then they learned their lesson because no one wanted these things and they had to change them back. This was their big loss. Now, all of us out here in reality, we actually cheered this and thought it was the end of SJW Marvel, but we all know now that it certainly wasn't the end of SJW Marvel. But that was their point of loss. And that was very significant. And that's the point that I want to focus on. But before I do that, we have to go back a little bit to see what these comic pros actually think that they're doing with their comics. And to do that, I'll use some of my quotes from Sana Amanat and G. Willow Wilson, because they are the most prominent and most vocal of this group that I can find. So what Sana Amanat sees as her purpose in putting out comics is to push ideas. She literally said that she is there to push positive ideas. And she's a far leftist, of course, so her idea of positive ideas would be far leftist ideas. These would be her idea of positive ideas, and she is pushing positive ideas. And G. Willow Wilson, she did a very long interview with the New York Times, and she was very candid in that, and it was great because you get to see her mindset now and what she thought it was prior to now, because she describes all of these things. Right now, she actually sees her role as a creator and a creator of comics as being a stronghold for far leftist leaders, where she can provide them with what she calls hope fuel and ideas. So basically what she is doing with her work is she is providing a place for these far leftist leaders to retreat to, and there she will give them hope and she will arm them with ideas so that they can be sent out later when they are rested so that they can attack again. That is her whole plan for why she is creating material and what she writes, and she makes no bones about it. But the interesting thing is, prior to the last election, she gives a description of what she thought her job was as a creator. Prior to that, she, and I would say Sana Amanat and a lot of these comic pros as well, would share her idea that it was their job as creative people to put out quote-unquote progressive ideas because in their minds society would continue down this quote-unquote progressive path, and they would simply lead people down this path with their creative endeavors. That's what she saw prior to the last election, her job being as a creative person. These people in their mind, they had no question whatsoever that society was going to continue down the road with no stopping ever with these progressive ideas. The only question was how fast they went and what kind of role that they as creators might be able to play in this. They never even admitted to the idea in their minds that people might actually turn around and not like what they're selling. It never even crossed their mind. But when they got kicked in the teeth with the last election, then she changed her attitude, quite specifically, as she says in the New York Times article, and she started providing this hope fuel, this place of retreat, this place of security, where she can arm them with good ideas so that they can go back out and fight. So that's what they all thought that their purpose was. I would take her as the example of a lot of these comic pros as what their job was. It wasn't to create a good product. It was to sell progressive ideas and lead culture down this progressive path. That's what she, and again, I would say a lot of these progressive SJW types, saw their job as entailing. But they never thought it would go in the opposite direction. I would say even when the election came around and they all started freaking out, they still didn't think that it was ever going to go, in their minds, backwards. You know, that people would actually start to recoil away from where they're trying to be led. And they just thought they were encountering a lot of resistance, and they were just going to have to slow down a little bit and then push again and push harder this time. And it was going to continue down this quote-unquote progressive path. But with comics, certainly, their loss came when they had to change those characters back. Because they put out there that they weren't going to change them, no matter what, and they had to change them. And they had to go backwards. And that was the moment they realized that things could actually reverse on them. That people could actually go away from where they were trying to lead them. Not that it was simply going to slow down and that they were going to make a bigger push later. No, they realized that people were actually starting to turn around and walk away from them in the other direction. This is the big point of loss. Okay? And this is why I would say there is the stages of grief, because it's also known as the stages of loss. So quickly, these stages of loss, they are denial, isolation, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Some people combine a couple of them together, but those are your basic stages of loss. And I can see through these quotes that I've been going through for this footnoting that I want to do on my Twitter, that these are the stages that comic pros have really been going through, and the comic industry has been going through over the last year and a half. Now, some of the comic pros are in different stages than others, but I'm just going to talk generally about the industry itself. So number one is denial. And I think really the biggest example of denial would be Sana Amanat. I have quotes from her here from the San Diego Comic-Con of last year. And I'm going to read you a couple of short ones to just actually hammer home this idea of how much she was in denial at that point. And I think this was the end of her denial. It was going on for some time before that. This is what she says. There are a lot of books like that. She's talking about canceled books, by the way, which they make it out there. Maybe they don't last 50 issues, but they last for the time that they do. And I consider that a success and a special moment, because then hopefully people will go buy them in a collection and in a trade. And we don't consider books like that to be any less successful than a book like Avengers. And then she goes on to say, well, with Marvel in general, I will say it's always ebbs and flows of our series and what works and what's selling and what's not selling and what not. But it doesn't mean, again, like I said before, it doesn't mean that they're not successful. So this is just straight up denial on her part. Okay, you have these comics. They keep getting canceled. They don't get to 50 issues. They don't even get anywhere close to 50 issues. They know that people aren't buying them, but still, she says they're just as successful as an Avengers comic that sells really well. They don't consider these things a failure, even though they fail. They still see them, she still sees them at that point as successful, like America Chavez, which everyone hated and just got pummeled by everybody. No, she still considers that a success. This is just straight up denial on her part. And this is the best example, I would say, that I have of this kind of denial. Now, the second stage would be isolation. And you really don't have to go too far to see isolation. You have all these people just isolating themselves. I did an entire, actually 2 videos. One on the New York Comic-Con panel, which was the Women of Marvel panel there. And again, after another Women of Marvel podcast after that, where you had all these women, Sana Amanat being right at the forefront, saying that you have to not listen to anybody who is a critic. You have to actually disable all of the stuff on your social media that allows people to talk directly to you. And one of the women actually came out and said, she really wanted to see what everybody was saying. So she opened up her comms on her social media to let everybody participate for about a month, and the rest of them just drew back in horror, saying, you can't do that. Why would you do that? Because, of course, they have to isolate themselves. They want themselves to be completely isolated. And we also see this on Twitter with everybody being blocked, and you have people like Jordan White, who just recently got promoted from a group editor at Marvel to one of the higher up editors at Marvel. And what was the very first thing he did after his promotion? Well, he went on a blocking spree on his Twitter to make sure that no negative voices got in whatsoever. This is what these people do. I mean, we can all see it. They block you. And part of this also would be, this book is not for you. You've probably heard that many a times if you're on social media and you try to talk to some of these comic pros. They will say that over and over again. You need to not be part of this discussion because this book is not for you. And again, this is a type of isolation. And this is the isolation that's been going on for a little while now. And that's the second stage of their loss and grief. And the third stage is anger. And I don't think any of us need to go very deep into your minds to remember some point where you have these comic pros being angry with everything and everyone around them. They are just massively angry all the time. And you can see this on social media again. You can see it where they threaten to kill or maim comic creators because they're putting out a product that is actually going to compete with their product. You can see them literally calling everybody who disagrees with them a Nazi. And there's no wonder that they have this anger. Because, of course, they drank the Kool-Aid, the far leftist Kool-Aid, a long time ago. And they believe that they're doing their part for their little revolution. And so they've given up any other kind of life. These people get roped into this idea, and they give up on ideas of having a family. They give up of any ideas of creating a social net outside of their little revolutionary group. They have nothing else besides this. And when they are learning that, guess what? You are going to fail, because when you realize that you have put all of your effort and all of your life into this thing, which is going to fall apart and fail, and you will have nothing left, of course that makes them angry. There's no wonder that they're angry. And then we move on to the next stage, which is bargaining. The Umbrella Guy just did a really good video about the attacks on Alterna, and all of these comic pros saying, well, I'll listen to what you have to say if you leave Comicsgate and denounce it, and then I might listen to what you have to say, actually. That's bargaining. That's what that is. And it's been going on for a little while now with many comic pros. They're trying to bargain their way out of this. They think that they have some kind of leverage that they can use to move people away from a good product and back into this idea of let's just promote quote-unquote progressive ideals. But they don't have anything to bargain with. And Sana Amanat, she said in that Comic-Con panel at San Diego, when she was talking about putting these characters back into other venues, she says at the end of that quote, so we are taking those characters into these other places, and also, honestly, we want to do more with them, but we need that support. And she's talking to the audience saying, we need your support to do that. Again, this is her bargaining, this is her asking for help. And when Marvel Rising started to come out, because she was working on that for more than 2 years, she honestly, the way that she talked about it and still talks about it, she thought it was going to be the savior of Marvel Comics. She really did. And she put all of her effort into it. And when it was about to come out and they were putting this push on to try to sell it to everybody and no one was buying it, she got onto her podcast and said, please, please let your kids watch this, because the main thing was the movie that came on the Disney Channel. She was saying to parents, please let your kids stay up and watch this. I know it's on late, but please let them watch it. So again, there she is bargaining, right? She's trying to get past this stage. That is a very important stage, and a stage that I think many comic pros are in. But I think a lot of comic pros have now started to go into the second to last step, which is depression. Now, I think this is where we are right now, within depression. And this is a very, very dangerous stage. Now, why do I think we're in this stage of depression? Well, Richard over at Comics Matter, he actually did a video just recently talking about, I think it was X-Force, and how mediocrity was not going to save comics. He thought that these people, these creators, were saying to themselves, okay, we're just not going to push very far. We're just going to put out a mediocre book and people will start to come back. That was his thought. And he said, no, that's not going to work. Actually, I don't believe that that's the case at all. What I believe the case is that these people, these creators, are simply now depressed. Again, when they're realizing that they have just wasted all of their lives, that they're too old now to have a family, and they got nothing left, and everything's going south for them, and they're going to lose, they're in depression. That's the next stage, right? They're depressed. That's why they're writing these bland, horrible comics now. Certainly, a lot of them aren't horrible in the way that they used to be, which was pushing all of this politics on you. Some of them still are, but not all of them. Some of them are just bland. And I would say this is a result of them being depressed. This is them just realizing that, why should I care? Nothing's going to actually work out the way that I want. I got into this entire thing so that I could push these progressive ideas, so that I could bring society further down the idea of quote-unquote progress, and no matter what I do, people are just going to now go in the opposite direction. So I would say again, they're in this place of depression right now. And why is that dangerous? Well, it is dangerous because of this. These people are, again, far leftist. In their ideology, the most quote-unquote virtuous thing that you can be is a victim. That's what all of them want to be. That's their highest point of, again, quote-unquote virtue for them, is to be a victim. They all know, even if it's innately in the back of their minds, how to be a victim. They have studied in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just being entrenched in this ideology and the people around them. They know very, very well how to be a victim. And the thing is that when they are depressed like this, it is going to be very, very easy for them to portray themselves as victims. And again, part of this danger would be the Captain Marvel movie that is coming out, because I think that they're looking to get a second wind from it, but part of that second wind might indeed be to portray themselves as victims. That is to say, they will take it and say, look at this success. See, all of these people that have been saying bad things about how we've created this character in the comics, they are the bad ones. Please pity us, pity us. That's part of what they're going to do. They're going to claim victimhood status. And that is why it's so dangerous. We cannot let them claim this victimhood status due to this depression that they're in right now. We need to pile on. Just keep on being honest. Now, I won't go so far as to say kick them while they're down, although some people might. I would just say, just don't stop. Criticize. It doesn't matter what state they're in. It doesn't matter if they're going to play the victim. It doesn't matter if they're depressed and they've realized that they just wasted their life. You just look at them and say, look, people have told you that for a long time now. I'm not going to stop criticizing. That's where we need to be. We need to make sure that we are stoic enough to make sure that they understand that no professional sad puppy dog face and sad violin music in the background is going to save them at this point. We need to make sure that we keep on being honest. We need to make sure that we keep on criticizing according to merit. And that's where things need to go. Alright, I talked much too long with this video, but I had to go through all the stages. So if it gave you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me whether you've seen this pattern in comic prose over the last year, year and a half. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.